Hi there, it's February 29th, 2024. Welcome to episode 312 of Roqe. I'm Jian Gomeshi. Hello to you from Toronto. Salam dostan aziz, durud ba shoma. Hope you are doing well wherever you are tuning in from around the world. We have certainly spent a good deal of time being critical of the Islamic Republic of Iran on this program. Everything from the current repressive theocratic rule to the mismanagement, the economic troubles, the problematic traditions that may still exist. But we always need to be careful to not play into stereotypes about life in Iran and the people leading it. For example, the idea that those in Iran are not as up to date as those living in the West, as such presumptions might be made about, say, fashion. After all, how can a troubled nation mired in sanctions, disunity, popular protest, financial troubles, resource blockades possibly keep up with the dynamic clothing styles of Milan, New York, Paris, LA, and the Iranians living in those places? But what if we turn it around? That is, while it may seem counterintuitive, Iranians inside Iran may be considered more fashionable than those in the diaspora because they've developed a distinct style that goes beyond simply wearing fancy name brands and sartorial status symbols. In Iran, where access to Western luxury brands is limited and expensive, people have had to rely on their creativity and resourcefulness to create stylish looks. This has resulted in a fashion culture that values individuality and personal expression over conformity to Western mainstream trends. On the other hand, many Iranians in the diaspora, especially those in Western countries, have easier access to luxury brands and tend to place more emphasis on wearing these labels as a way to display their social status. As a result, their fashion choices can sometimes be seen as more formulaic and less original compared to those of Iranians in Iran. People inside Iran have been able to maintain a strong connection to their cultural roots through their fashion choices. They often incorporate traditional Iranian elements, such as intricate patterns and fabrics, into their outfits, creating a unique and distinctive style that sets them apart from others around the world. So the case can be made that people inside Iran are considered more fashionable and have been able to develop a style that is innovative, culturally rich, and independent of mainstream fashion trends. It's a case that is going to be made by my featured guest today, the globally acclaimed designer and Iranian-American fashion mogul Nima Behnoud, better known by his company name, NIMANY. He's going to sit down with me in the Roqe Studio for one of his first long-form interviews of this type in English. NIMANY coming up. Here we go. Let's get started. Good to have you with us. This is Roqe, episode 312. Are people inside Iran more fashionable? Roqe Studio. Hello, smart Pegah.
Hello.
Happy leap year day.
Yes.
February 29th. Step into the microphone, Pegah. Nima Behnoud. You know, it's been actually, I think it's been about 3 years. The show's been on for 4 years. For most of those 4 years, we've been trying to get NIMANY on the show. He's such an interesting guy. And I'll put this to him in the interview, but I think, like, other than the super icons in our broader community, like, I don't know, Gugush, Reza Pahlavi, like Farah Pahlavi, I think NIMANY might be one of the most recognizable names for Iranians anywhere in the world.
Definitely.
There's certain rock stars that some people may not know. There's certain politicians some people may not know. There's certain, actors or whatever. This NIMANY is pretty universal.
I think the brand in and of itself, the name NIMANY for sure, but also some of the first designs that he ever created are so well known, and even the individuals who don't know the name of the brand can recognize some of the pieces so quickly.
He kind of changed the game for Iranians outside of Iran and for Iranians inside of Iran, expressing that fusion of Persian art, poetry, traditions, etc., and modern fast-forward fashion, forward-thinking fashion. I don't know what's the term. Fast
fashion.
Not fast fashion, because that's like
is the
no. Fashion forward.
Fashion forward.
That's what I was looking for. Not fast forward, but also fast forward.
But also
he's quick.
Yes.
This guy's nimble. He's coming into the studio in just a few moments. Happy to have Nima Behnoud here on the question: are people inside Iran more fashionable? And I love this because I'm guessing, I mean, we just put it up on Instagram and immediately the response was yes. I'm guessing for most Iranians, they get it. If you were to ask most people outside of the Iranian community if they think that's true, they would think of, based on stereotypes of Iran and what you see on the news, which would be a bunch of people. They don't just show people wearing rusari. They show the chador, a bunch of women and just clothed like it's like the Taliban.
Yeah,
they would be like, "Oh, are you kidding? Fashion stuff."
They would have such a skewed view, I think.
But the more I've sort of thought about this issue and gotten ready for this interview, it totally makes sense. I mean, I kind of spoiler alert. Nima's going to argue that there is a dynamic fashion culture coming out of Iran, inside Iran, that doesn't necessarily exist in the West amongst Iranians who are caught up in the, as we know, brand names and the more mainstream stuff that's been around for a while. And out of necessity, or maybe more than that, I'll ask him, young designers and people in Iran are doing some really cool interesting things. Yeah. So your answer would be yes to this question.
100%. I mean, it's funny when we were talking about this topic, I was thinking just in my immediate group of friends, most of them now, if they have a big event coming up or if there's, something that they really need to shop for, they don't do it here. They'll wait to either go back to Iran, or if they still have family there, there's specific people that they know or brands that they know and things like that, and they'll shop from there because it's just that much nicer than what we have available to us here.
You must have a lot of working class friends who
here we go.
What a simple idea. Oh, I need a new outfit, a shirt. Maybe I'll fly to Iran to buy it. Well, all the regular people you hang out with. I'm looking forward to this. Nima coming up. We're going to do the roundup after because he's waiting here and we have him in Toronto. I don't think he comes to Toronto that often. He's got to pop up here the next few days. So we got to take advantage of having Nima Behnoud. Nimani joining us in just a moment. In the coming days on Roqe, Sara Nayani will join me. Shahbal Shapare will be here in the studio. The artist Mobina Nouri. Hamid Rahmanian. He does that shadow theater with the puppets the multidisciplinary multimedia art. Song of the North is his latest production. He'll be here in the Roqe Studio. Somebody that I don't know if we've booked that you will know her music because you love Persian music. Nusha Farin.
Oh, I didn't know.
Actually, not just music, but an actress who goes back to the pre-Islamic Republic days of the 70s, where it turns out she was kind of like doing some racy stuff too, there's pictures of her like without clothing on and all this. I mean, she was kind of a pioneer, not a pioneer. I'm guessing she wasn't the only one doing it, but she was part of that progressive wave of liberal arts happening in Iran in the 70s.
Oh, I'm very excited to
have her. I think she's going to be in the studio.
Amazing.
Nusha Farin coming up. I'm very excited about that as well. And we're going to make a big announcement in the coming days about our next Roqe live shows. So get ready for that. We are coming to you on roqemedia.com. You can link to all of our platforms there at our website, roqemedia.com. We are, of course, on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, and CastBox. You can see a lot of what we're doing. We shoot video. We have little video tidbits, little funny animations, all that stuff on YouTube or at our Telegram channel, on Instagram as well. And our Telegram channel is in English and in Persian. So if you want the bilingual version of the show, check us out on Telegram. If you want to support what we do, go to our website, roqemedia.com, and press the Support Us button to go to our Patreon page and become a regular Roqe member. Pegah, I'm going to trade you for Nima Behnoud. So he's going to come into the studio. There he is, coming in the studio. And let's get to our feature interview. Are Iranians inside Iran more fashionable than those in the diaspora who may have more access to high fashion and more resources? In other words, despite living in a more repressed society, or maybe even because of that, are Iranians inside Iran somehow more creative today with their sartorial expressions? That's our proposition for this episode. And again, my very special featured guest today is someone who not only believes the answer is yes, but has lived it to a certain extent in his own journey to fashion success. He is a New York-based designer who was born and raised in Tehran, where he nurtured his passion for creativity from an early age. Nima Behnoud is the son of Masoud Behnoud, a prominent journalist and writer. And Nima embarked on his artistic journey as a junior illustrator at a popular magazine in Tehran, immersing himself in the vibrant atmosphere of the art department as a teenager. At 18, Nima relocated to California, eventually making his way to New York to pursue his design aspirations. He refined his skills at the Fashion Institute of Technology, laying the foundation for his future endeavors. In his 20s, Nima founded his own brand, NIMANY, blending Persian typography with contemporary designs, earning global acclaim for his distinctive style. His innovative approach extended to jewelry then and handbags, with iconic pieces like the Farsi letter H ring becoming synonymous with his work. Through NIMANY, Nima continues to push boundaries, redefining traditional motifs with his unmistakable artistic vision, leaving an indelible mark on the worlds of fashion and design. He is here for a NIMANY event in Toronto from March 1st to March 3rd, located at 300 King Street East in downtown Toronto. If you are listening to us right now, anywhere in the Greater Toronto Area, the broader Ontario, if you're in Canada, you want to head to Toronto, downtown Toronto, the NIMANY pop-up for the next 3 days. But first, right now, Nima Behnoud joins me in the Roqe Studio. Hello, sir.
Hello. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that kind introduction.
Is it a kind introduction, or is it your illustrious career so far?
It's kind.
What's the unkind version? I mean,
I've had the unkind version.
You have,
yeah,
huh?
Yeah.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to Toronto. And I was just saying before we started recording this show that I've seen a few interviews with you in the process of researching. Not a lot of interviews in English, which is counterintuitive given that you've spent most of your life outside of Iran. So I'm glad to get the opportunity to do this in English, because most of your audience, or your clientele at least, is non-Iranian, right?
They're about more than half, about 60 to 70% are non-Iranian. And the way I categorize them is a pretty good majority of them have no relations with Middle East or Iranian. Like, they don't have a Persian wife or a girlfriend or boyfriend. So brand new, fresh. And that's, I prefer that in a way, because, we can take the art to the next level and make them understand where the culture stands.
I'm going to ask you about that in particular, but just to start off, you're here for a pop-up. What's the most challenging part of doing a 3-day pop-up of NIMANY in Canada for a weekend?
It's funny, actually. The first ever pop-up that NIMANY had was in Toronto. It was in 2005. Just because there was a fashion event in Toronto, and a friend of mine said, we should really go there. And at that point, we were young and we only had T-shirts, and I have never been in any kind of a trunk show or a pop-up show. So we came here, and it was such a successful show. Again, no Iranians attended that show. It was a fashion show. There was nothing, no ties to the Persian community. And we sold every single T-shirt. So that felt really good. So the whole notion of trunk shows started from Toronto.
When you say no Iranians, you get little excitement in your voice.
Right.
Why is I'm assuming because there's bigger business to be done with the entire rest of the world than just the Iranian market.
It's that too, in a marketing business side of it, but The brand started in 2005. The first ever Iranian who purchased anything from the brand was 2007. So for 2 years, not only Iranians did not become the clientele of the brand, but they really never endorsed it because
even though what you were doing was steeped in Persian art. And
right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing negative about it. This is how we are. I mean, as a teenager, I used to wear Timberland and Levi's and all of that.
Right.
And I was very proud of being influenced by the Western brands.
Right.
But when NIMANY started, we were really the first who implemented anything Persian into a contemporary fashion. I'm not talking about the haute couture of a one item on a red carpet, like a street fashion.
Right.
And this was a big thing, and people were not ready for it in a way. And I have a feeling that maybe they were hesitant because, 9/11 had happened. Things were in a different space at that time. So, and I had to communicate this to a lot of my friends in New York who are very, very famous and prominent artists. I don't want to name them now, but I asked them for help. Like, this is what I'm trying to do. What do you think? Almost all of them were against it.
Persian artists.
Yes.
So interesting. I saw you saying this in an interview, and
Right.
I couldn't understand why.
So,
Because now, of course,
right.
I'm sure that they're on side, right?
Yes. So, and the proposition was, you're labeling yourself as an Iranian in the middle of New York City right after 9/11. Like, why do you want to do that? Like, are you trying to be an activist? And to be honest, I wanted to have a job. I wanted to do something. I had no special mission. I'm not an activist. I didn't do this for a cause or anything. I wanted to have a living. I was a graphic designer in New York, and it was either this or go work for another ad agency or whatnot. So this was a job for me. And, the good thing that I'm proud of myself now is all of those, not negative, but all of those comments that maybe this is not the right direction didn't really have any effect on me. And I continued doing it. And I kept pushing it until at a time that celebrities...
Sorry, why didn't it have an effect on you? Why didn't it deflate you?
It's going to sound really bad if I say it, but...
Then you have to say it. What?
It didn't have any effect because I didn't want them to be my customers. I said, they don't have money. They're not going to buy it. So that's not my audience. It's okay if they don't like it. I'm going to go for a power audience. I mean, this was very naive of somebody to think that way, but I did. I was 21, and it's okay for me to think that way, to stereotype people like that with their purchasing power. But as soon as Paris Hilton, Heidi Klum, Nikki Hilton, these girls started wearing my T-shirts, all of a sudden the Iranian community gained the confidence to come and subscribe to this. Okay, great. Now they're about 40% in general, 40% of the audience, but it's interesting to know that 40%, majority of them are either in East Coast or Canada, not in California. Contrary to what you may think, California is not a big seller for us.
That is contrary to what I would think.
Yeah. And I thought about it a lot, and I think the reason for that is maybe, not to generalize, but maybe the Persian community in California are not super proud of their heritage. Maybe they're just a little bit proud. They changed their names to Freddy's and Tony's and all of that. And
Right.
So there is something there. I would have never changed my name. Even if my name was Ghulam Reza, I would have not changed it. But some people do, and it's okay.
Nothing wrong with Ghulam Reza, by
There
the
is
way.
absolutely nothing wrong with it.
But
I'm
hang
just
on
an
a second,
example.
2 steps back, because you've touched on something that I feel is a paradox in the Iranian condition, the diasporic Iranian condition, in that there's always a great deal of pride, whether it's kudosh, or like our history, or or even more contemporary, Reza Shah, Mossadegh, whatever it might be.
Right.
But then there's this there's this real need for validation from the West, Americans, white people. I'm not sure how to define it, but I've certainly noticed that even in my own life, where the media success I've had in a non-Iranian community means a lot more to Iranians than even when I launched Roqe. They were like, okay, so for Iranians, what is that? What is that about? Why do we require that kind of validation?
I mean, stepping back a little bit, I feel like the reason that when after immigration, this process starts to kick in is all the troubles that an immigrant has to go through. Obviously, they have to fit in and they have to adapt a brand new culture and deal with new set of nuances and all of that. And there's a lot of work. So self-expression and individuality is not the first in your list, because there's a lot of other things that you have to do, right. And you have to have a job and a tax and this and that. So people in Tehran, I mean, besides the fact that 70% of the country are below the age 40, which is a very unique thing for a country. Yeah. So it's a very fresh, vibrant, dynamic youth in Iran. And all of those guys, without knowing, they're involved in self-branding, extreme branding. They want to look a certain way. They want to influence a group. So that is why they're so advanced in adapting into new look and feel. I see brands in Tehran that people are whether it's the replica or the real, it doesn't matter. But
wait a second, you're segueing into what we're. I love it. I love it. You're going into what we're gonna talk about. Right. But you went there based on the conversation about why do we need American validation? Right. Is it to suggest that new generations don't need that in the way that the people who came 40 years ago still crave that or still appreciate that? And those same people who were saying to you, why are you doing this Iranian stuff? Why, you could have a future, create something that has nothing to do with Iran. These are people who obviously take great pride in being Iranian too. That paradox is so weird for me because it speaks to an inferiority complex that we need the acceptance of the West, which has been our whole point has been we don't want to be the West, I thought, right?
Right, exactly. So in Persian community, this issue that you had mentioned is actually much lower than other ethnicities that I've experienced myself, but it does exist. And the older generation have it more because they had to deal with a lot more hardship when they immigrated. I think that's the reason. When they came to US, they had to deal with a lot of unfamiliar territories. Now, somebody, if they move to, let's say, New York from Tehran right now, they're very ready. They're financially, they're going to suffer, but they're ready. They have Instagram, TikTok, this, that. They know the lingo. They know what to do. They know what not to do.
Yes.
So they're, in a sense, they have this background that, I mean, nothing is like being there and actually doing it, but they're pretty ready. I think our parents and our grandparents were not that ready. So they came in and they were looking up for somebody to say, yes, it's okay, yes, it's not okay. So I think that's part of the reason that a lot of people, when I communicated this idea of a NIMANY as a brand to a lot of very smart, very intelligent artists, they were against it because they actually cared for me. They were like, this is not going to be a lucrative thing for you. And I mean, go ahead and do it if you want to do it, but why? This is not right. And again, I'm not ashamed of saying it. As soon as celebrities brought it to them, they were okay with it.
And has your self-impression changed in those 25 years? In other words, it's quite amazing, actually. Just you coming on this show, just mentioning it. I mentioned it once last week on the program, and I've told a couple of people about it. There's a general excitement about you. First of all, Iranians know you. I mean, I don't even know if I can think of a brand, maybe Gugush or something, but this kind of universal knowledge of NIMANY is remarkable. You know what you've accomplished, and so you're clearly at quite a high tier in terms of the success and accomplishment. And yet, I was seeing an interview that you did a couple of years ago where you say you believe NIMANY is a work in progress, which is an interesting thing to say for a guy who's as successful as you are. So do you see yourself differently as the guy from 2005 or 1995 who was creating these things, or do you accept that you're more than just a work in progress?
I still see it as a work in progress, but maybe it's a lot more has been done now, but there is a lot more that I would like to do as a brand. I mean, I educated myself. You know, when I started the brand, I just knew I was a graphic designer, and I printed a graphic that was interesting on a T-shirt. But then I wanted this to become a brand, and I understood that after T-shirt, there isn't much that you can do. If you look at all these, I don't know if you remember Ed Hardy and
Sure.
like all these T-shirt brands, like a brand that does T-shirt, or a brand that their hero product is a T-shirt. You can't
remember Ed Hardy. Wasn't it just like 15 years ago?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
You really can't go anywhere from a T-shirt because you started at a price point that is too low, at a product that is too common, and then you cannot go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But now I have a clutch that is $500 and it's my best-selling product. So moving from the T-shirt into the next level, which was jewelry and then belts and then handbags and perfumes and rugs and all of that, required an actual knowledge. So I sent myself back to school to study supply chain management and fashion management and all of that. And I got my master's, so I understood what to do to have a brand. And I'm glad that we're at the point that the T-shirts are not that popular anymore, my T-shirts. So people like to buy a handbag, and the handbag is a pretty expensive item for a brand of my size. So that's exciting for me, that the positioning of the brand has changed to a level like that. But there is still a lot that I would like to do. That's why I say work in progress.
You so often talk about wanting to that your mission is telling a story.
Right.
Do you believe that that's part of what any fashion designer, any fashion at all, is doing, or is that something that's unique to you?
I believe that majority of the fashion brands who have a strong DNA, they have a story, and it's super important to have a story. And they don't even have to say that story. It could convey itself through a visual experience. All the brands that at least I like, say Tom Ford and Marc Jacobs, but they have a story. They have a pretty strong story. And I experienced a unique circumstances as a teenager in Iran. And I still get excited when I tell somebody about those days and what we went through. And I think that's a pretty good story. And that story kind of empowered me to come and create a brand in a city like New York, which is, New York is a very rough place for a 20-year-old who doesn't have any money. So
it was audacious. It was audacious. You had a gig in California. You were you had a job. You were it's kind of badass and maybe even a little arrogant to think I can go to New York and make it there.
Yeah. I'm glad I did that. I mean, California is fantastic, but it wasn't for me. I threw myself at a situation that was very unknown, very scary, and I was scared, but things slowly started to work. And you know how when you're very satisfied creatively, you don't really have to have money, you don't have to have financial success, but you're just satisfied and happy, and that becomes the driving force behind everything. And I'm so lucky that happened to me.
How do you navigate the line between telling a story and wanting to make a shitload of money? In other words, if there's a product that can make you a shitload of money that doesn't involve telling the story, do you still do it?
Okay. Money is important. It's not, again, I don't have such a mission to give this story to people. There's not much value to that. I mean, I have a nice story. I'm like a director who has a very nice screenplay,
Yes.
but I want to sell the film. People have to come and buy the ticket and watch it and like it, and then we make money. So the story is important, and I feel like in a product, when the story becomes less than 10%, that product doesn't sell. That product doesn't
becomes less than 10%.
Right.
Such a specific, like
So-
you've looked at this scientifically.
Exactly. So right now, after Nimani, you see many Persian brands.
Yes.
Many brands who tapped into the same thing that we
Yes.
tapped into. But at least from the ones that I've seen, it's either too much of the Persianness to it. Actually, I haven't seen too little. I've seen only too much. It's too much. So it's for the Persian audience. Somebody not from this background is not going to understand what's going on when you have too much of something. And it's really difficult to understand what is the threshold. So I have a page of Shahnameh, and Shahnameh is a Game of Thrones. People are beheading each other. It's not a rosy tale. So,
Right.
but it's colorful and beautiful.
Yes.
So what are you going to do? And it looks good. But if they get close, they're going to be frightened by the scenery that they see. So that's such a potent thing to use, but you can't use all of it. And I know you want to use all of it because it's so beautiful. So what does it mean to use a little bit of it? Trial and error, focus group. All my focus groups are non-Iranian. Look at this bag. What do you see? And they say, okay, I see beauty. I said, okay, come close. What do you see? Oh my God, blood. Okay, so tell me, are you upset about seeing that? What would you like to see more? So a lot of these back and forths are the foundation of this brand, that we found this sweet spot that the global audience can see the beauty of the Persian art. If you go and extract the Persian art the way it is, it's beauty for me and you, maybe. Not for me entirely, but
It is for me.
So
The clutches, for example, is beautiful. Right.
no, I'm talking about the classical Persian art, the way you extract it from the history.
I see.
I mean, I don't want to get sidetracked, but I'll bring an example. For example, Paisley or Bottejeke that we have, it's Persian. It's purely Persian, even though in India, subcontinent India, they used it more in all sorts of things, but it's Persian and it's from Iran. So that thing can be really ugly. But at the same time, Alexander McQueen used it in a dress and it's beautiful.
Right.
Nanette Lepore used it in a collection and it looks beautiful. So what is it? So that ingredient was used at the right amount.
Yes.
But my grandmother had a piece of fabric that was loaded with paisleys and it looks horrendous. You can't even look at it. I mean, from an aesthetic point of view, but
I love this answer because it's like forgive me, I don't mean this that you're the equivalent of fast food. I was just thinking, my mind went to that when they discovered that perfect ingredient for the McDonald's burger that's going to make people addicted to this. I'm a fan of McDonald's. How can a company be number one for decade after decade? These guys did something right, right?
Absolutely.
Whether it's healthy for you or not, et cetera. Leave that aside. It's like you're in a lab, finding the perfect formula. Why do the non-Iranians like it? I mean, like you say, I might like it because I'm like, oh, I can wear this T-shirt, or my girlfriend can carry this clutch, and we're also representing this is our culture.
Right.
What is it about for the non-Iranians that are the majority of your clientele, you say?
So one thing to say about the type of audience that want to support the culture and that's why they buy it, that's the worst kind of audience you can have. Because they turn you into a charity. They want to help you.
And we don't want that.
It's
we don't want anybody to help.
Let's say, would you go to Dolce & Gabbana and want to help the Italian culture to buy a pair of pants? So you don't do that. So, when a lot of people say, you know what, I really like your bag and I want to wear it and I want to show it to the world that come on, just become completely vain. Look at it. are you going to buy this clutch if it was next to Fendi and Gucci or not? If you would only buy it to support Iranian culture, don't buy it, because that doesn't mean you approve of this aesthetics.
Wait a minute. Why is that a bad thing if they want to buy it that way?
It's not a bad thing for the,
Seems like
the
a great
global
thing.
audience, but it's for a brand, it's very bad. For a brand, it's like me telling you, Jian, I'm going to come here and have an interview with you because I want to support your program, but not that I engage you being articulate and your program and all of that.
Right.
So the way we kind of separate,
It feels patronizing.
right?
I see.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it is. So that's why all these trial and error sessions and focus groups are conducted by non-Iranians, because I want to make sure that, okay, Kim Kardashian has my clutch. Does she want to support the Iranian culture and show the world how beautiful this culture is? I don't think so. She wants to have an exotic item
Yes.
that looks different.
Yes.
So what do I do with this to look exotic? Do I have to be worried about our intellectuals who say, oh, you used this dot wrong and this wasn't supposed to be like that? Or should I care about the judgmental eyes of the fashion industry more? So it's a paradox. It's a fine line. And
But let me try this on you though. If your brand becomes as big as yours has, and you are embedding, maybe not appropriating, but using, celebrating elements of ancient Persian, Iranian art, culture, poetry, whatever. Do you not have some kind of responsibility? I mean, just to put it out there, why wouldn't it be appropriate to say, Nima Jun, if you're going to do this, the world is seeing this through your designs. We want you to get it right, or we want it to celebrate us somehow.
right. Then I become a ambassador for showing the culture to the world, and become a historian to do it correctly, to understand it correctly. I mean, I've done a lot of readings, more than probably somebody who's as young as me and studied history of art, Persian history. But it was for my business that I did that. So I studied it so that I'm not saying something that is wrong, and I'm not extracting something that is from a different kind of background. But the best way to explain this is to bring an example. So if I have the letter H as a knuckle on a clutch, I like the knuckle because the clutch is beautiful, the knuckle is violence, and the marriage of these two creates something sexy, and people gravitate towards it, and other brands do that. Alexander McQueen do that, Gaultier does that. So and I did that, and it worked. Now, in my new collection, I'm going to flip this letter so that it's going to be a wrong reading, but it's going to fit on a hand nicer. Now all these guys are going to be like, whoa, what are you doing? You can't do that. It has to be right reading. It has to be Farsi. No, it doesn't. It has to look good. That's number one. Yes, on a secondary level, it cannot be something that is false, and it cannot be something that is not from the correct origin. Yes, I agree. But the look matters if you want to survive in the fashion industry.
The other thing, just as an aside, man, is when you're achieving success, all the decisions seem like the right decisions. You know, when you're not, well, clearly. I mean, but you said something a few moments ago that I'm glad you went there, because I wanted to ask you about. I mean, you are seen unquestionably as a trailblazer. With that said, there are a lot of designers doing this thing, as you've said, of using paeans to our ancient Persian culture, or our designs, or our background, and fusing those with modern designs and fashion forward looks. And does that piss you off, that there are others kind of doing what you've done?
It doesn't piss me off. In a way, sometimes.
The name of the show is Roqe.
Right. I'll try to be as Roqe as possible. But sometimes, I'll tell you why sometimes I get pissed off, but majority of times I am happy that they finally gained the confidence. So they're not afraid of this. They're not ashamed of this. They're not doing it right. It doesn't look good, but they're doing it. which is a huge step. That he or she are trying to make a brand that is Iranian, which is a huge step, and that's exciting. And it reminds me of myself in the beginning, that how nobody was excited about this, and I was completely alone. But these guys gained the confidence to do it. Fine. But
because there's a blueprint now that's been successful. That
and I'm not accusing any specific situation of copying, and I think inspiration comes in different shapes and forms, and it's fine. But when you ask me if I get pissed off, sometimes I get pissed off because I feel like this equation is so wrong, the ingredient, the percentage, the threshold, that is going to affect my stuff too, in a way, even though they're not going to be seen together. So that's really a rare situation, but that's the only time that I look at it and be like, oh, come on, don't do that.
How would it affect your stuff?
Okay, so let's say if somebody's, I don't know, searching for a very specific thing of Persian culture, and then they see some of my products next to somebody who thinks that they have a fashion product, and they don't look right, next to each other all of a sudden. In a way, it brings the wrong attention to that item.
I see. I think I understand what you mean. And I also understand what you mean when they go too far, you said, with the Persianness. It feels almost like it's like a fetish item. It's not really, like my Reza Shah mug, or something, rather than kind of something that is a practical fashion item that is going to be available to a global audience.
Right. Have you ever seen or heard about the stores called Sanaya Dasti, or the handcrafts? It's like a souvenir shop.
Yes.
It's like you come to New York and you go and buy I Love New York mug. In Iran, there are a lot of those.
Okay.
You can go there and see every single reference that we use or anybody uses.
Right.
But it's not cool. Nobody wants them.
Right.
There is no street cred. There's no clout about them. Nobody wants to associate themselves with Sanaya Dasti, but all the things are there. Everything is there. We have our embroidery is there, which is a very unique kind of embroidery. We have our all sorts of silver, metal work, leather work. Everything is there. But why is it not right? Because it's 200% that, with 0% style, 0% contemporariness, and all of that.
Yeah. It's it's the Princess Diane and plate that you get for to say you've gone to London.
Exactly.
I'm glad you said street cred, because one of the things I wonder about with you, given that you've become so successful, and given that there are all these young folks out there doing versions, albeit deficient versions of what you might have done, how do you stay in touch with the street? Is that something you think about or worry about? I mean, you're still a young guy, but ultimately a well-off guy hanging around in New York is not going to have the same tentacles as the student who was hungry for what he was doing, right?
Right. So, great question. I worry about that all the time, and that's the main concern. So from the morning that I wake up, my wife usually tells me, how do you know this brand? This is for kids. This is for teenagers. I get myself educated with street brands, global street brands, all the time, to an extent that I got so involved that I was hired by Kanye West to work on his jewelry collection, because I became so interested in the way that these Yeezys are working and the way these seasons are coming. So I ended up collaborating and making his jewelry line, because I love the streetwear and the whole vibe of streetwear. I mean, it's very interesting because fashion was a holy grail of untouchable thing up there until grunge happened, and grunge happened through music. I mean, I kind of divide music and fashion's marriage into two eras, before Nirvana and after Nirvana.
Interesting.
And the reason was that we have one music video, Smells Like Teen Spirit, that all of a sudden, for the first time, people want to look like those guys. And what happened? What are those? Like, they're wearing all these oversized sweaters that are ripped and vintage and all of that. So without knowing, grunge had happened. So the grunge fashion had happened. A few months after that, Marc Jacobs released a collection of grunge, and he got fired because of it, which is probably the best thing that happened to him. And then he was hired as a menswear designer for Louis Vuitton, and his life changed. So grunge happened. That was a huge influence, and that was the first time that the street fashion came on top. So street fashion came on top, influenced the entire fashion, killed the haute coutures. People did not go to Chanel to order one-off items and Dior and all of that. Things changed from that point of the history in 1991. So I feel like street fashion became luxury. It's no longer the street fashion as we used to have it. And a great example for that is the most expensive pair of denims we could ever buy was like $50, $60. But all of a sudden we became okay with paying $700 for a unique pair of denims. What happened?
Yeah.
What happened?
Torn, too, pre-torn.
Pre-torn. And who made this okay for us? Like, what kind of a cultural influence happened? And that's beautiful because the street fashion came on top. And when you look at these kids in Tehran, they're wearing Off-White, they're wearing Fear of God, all these like cult brands.
So how do you stay in touch with the street? What is it? Are you up at 3 a.m. surfing the internet, looking at? I mean, what is?
No.
What's your process?
I have few people from my team are in that age range, and they're pretty fanatic streetwear people. I connect with them. I also, being in New York helps a lot. I keep telling everyone, they're like, why did you add New York to your first name? It's a prominent part of the brand. It would not happen if I was in San Francisco or anywhere else. So the New York
or
part
Kentucky.
It would have been very interesting.
Kentucky. Different brand. Yeah.
So that's important. I keep myself up. I mean, I am one of those customers. I buy the latest streetwear brand that is in right now, and I go stand in a line to get a ticket to buy the pair of shoes that is rare.
But also, you would have to suppress your own ego to a certain extent to have a 21-year-old tell you, no, actually, Dad, that doesn't look so cool anymore, or we don't like those. That's not going to be easy to do, given you are NIMANY.
I love that. I listen to them. I'm being very Roqe. I love that advice that comes from the 21-year-old. And just a few weeks ago, I called my 21-year-old friend and I said, there is a fashion show in New York. Should I go, or am I going to be uncool if somebody sees me in that runway? And he's like, I don't know. Don't go. Okay, I'm not going to go. I listen to them because these guys are plugged in. They have TikTok and Instagram and this and that, and they're on Reddit and they're reading, and they're all these equations, and they're computing all the time. There is no way that I can keep up with that. No way that I can keep
Might they be wrong? Or is there no right or wrong?
I don't know. I mean, the good ones are not wrong. I mean, they have to be in the right environment. They have to be in a city, in a dynamic city like New York. But
who do you tend to bring on board? Like, how do you figure out who that 21-year-old's going to be that's just going to have that kind of access to you in your mind?
A lot of trial and error. But at some point when I was, let's say, 30 years old, I thought I was a hustler. I survived in New York. I'm a hustler. Until I saw an 18-year-old, and then I was like, I should really shut up about that. You are not a hustler. And these kids are operating on a very different level. And they are much smarter than me when I was 18 years old, or anybody at that point, because they're very aware of the situation. And I have a feeling that this is the same with Tehran. I mean, I see these kids. Yes, they have limitation, but they're also connected. They're also connected to Instagram and the global
Let me get
audience.
to that question at the heart of today's. By the way, you mentioned Kanye, but did you deal with him directly?
All the time.
And
sat with him in an empty room
as
hours and hours.
Idiosyncratic as he would appear to be in the gossip press?
Maybe. I didn't see that part. I mean, he came off extremely creative.
Is he nice to you?
Very nice to me. Extremely creative. He listened to me. That's the most important thing. But he goes through phases and moods. The mood shifts maybe more than a regular person. But I mean, majority of the creative directors are somewhat like that. He has some interesting ideas. He has changed the course of fashion. I mean, it's really naive to say he didn't, but he really did.
He has changed the course of fashion.
100%.
For the world?
Yes. Yes.
How so?
So you look at the footwear industry. Footwear industry on a sneaker level looks different pre-Easy and post-Easy. Everything looks different. He has influenced major brands to come and really produce something that looks like they're copying him. And they're okay with that. I'm sure somebody in their group said, don't do that, because everybody is going to say you copied Kanye West, but they did it because there was a value to that. And right now you see the situation going on with Adidas, and they want to do business with him despite everything that has happened. So, I mean, there is something to say about that. I mean, I'm not a fan of everything that he does, but...
Or some of the things he says, certainly. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But things have changed. And I think the reason that Louis Vuitton goes and hires Pharrell as a creative director is Kanye West.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's such a... I mean... You know, you sort of forget. I was such a fan of those early records, but there's so much talk about his, less impressive side, or some of the things he does and says, that you forget that the guy's, he really is kind of a alien-like artist who's got these ideas, right? Okay, so this question at the heart of today's episode, it seems, again, counterintuitive for Iranians in a country where we hear about repression, restriction of freedoms, where there's clothing laws. It seems interesting to make the case that people there are more fashionable, and yet there are many who would make exactly this case. Tell me why you think this is the case.
I deal with this question a lot, every day, almost. And I've done a lot of reading around the subject matter. So the way I answer myself with a situation like this is that I often ask, what is it about us saying that we have a rich heritage? So we do say that, right? Mm-hmm. Iranian, Persian has a very rich heritage.
You need to go back a couple thousand years sometimes. But
right, exactly. But what does that mean in a practical term for you and me today?
Nothing.
So
does it mean anything?
So exactly, when I'm sitting here next to, let's say, somebody from a different kind of background, and I say, listen, I'm Persian and I come from a very rich heritage. What did it give me? Like, what does it mean exactly? So I think that you can divide it into a conscious and subconscious kind of effects of this super rich heritage. That is true that we had the civilization and all of that, and Cyrus the Great and whatnot. And I did a lot of reading on these guys, by the way, like even Darius and Cyrus and all of that. They did great things, but okay, the guy was a genius war commander and he managed his army better than everyone else, and he did this. And what does it mean for me, for an Iranian immigrant in New York?
I might modify that to say, as great as those things, those incredible accomplishments might be, can I possibly take credit for them? 2,000 years later, as an Iranian in Toronto.
Not even the credit. I want to detect the traces of that effect in myself.
Okay, sure.
I want to look at my behavior today as an artist and say, which part of me comes from that greatness? I call it a greatness. Okay, so where is it? And the way that I can answer this is that there is a creativity hidden in majority of these kids that I see in Iran. And so everybody has this sense of self-expression. They want to show themselves. They want to brand themselves. But when you get to that region, all of a sudden they get really creative. And you cannot say that all of it is because of limitation. Limitation will make you more creative because you have to work with a smaller set of tools, and you're going to...
It will.
Yes.
So I love that. So this is the idea that it's if I give you a canvas that's only this big, you're going to be more creative than 100%. I say if you can use the whole room.
Yes.
Is that true of all repressed societies then?
No, 100%. And that's why I said it's not all limitation, because when I explain the situation in Iran to others, they're like, of course, because they don't have TV, they don't have this and that, they have to think. Yes, limitation is going to make you think more. But it's really not fair to say all of that creativity comes from limitation, because it doesn't. And
There's something in the DNA.
so
It's quite extraordinary.
how do you explain this? We had art movements in our history. We have a Esfahan school of painting, Tehran school of painting, and this is 15th, 16th century. At the same time, in Europe, we had Renaissance. So Iran had movements of art. When it was in Esfahan, everything got very like court-like and royal and fine lines. When it got to Tehran, because of the Qajar dynasty and all of that, it had a little bit of Western influence and became more interesting, and hyper-realism and all of that. This is really not a small thing, that this culture at that early stage of its history had art movement. I'm not comparing anything to anything, but take a look at our neighboring countries. When you study the Arab art, they had a magnificent art, but it was 100% Islamic art. It had to evolve around Islamic art until 2010 with the Arab Spring, that all of a sudden these Egyptian and French Tunisian artists started creating this movement called the Arab Spring. But we had this movement in 15th century in a very profound way. There was a school of art. So all these things become references that people can use. Like you have 25 different kinds of miniature, 25 different kinds of putting a miniature together.
Right.
There is a value to that. And you don't have to be an educated person, and you don't have to be an art historian to tap into that. It's there. You're going to see it. And your toolbox is much larger than somebody from a different background.
I love that. I love that. I want to believe that too, right. that our history, the lived history of those who came before us means something. But the question is, the proposition, Nima, is not just are Iranians more fashionable inside Iran than the rest of the world? It's, are Iranians more fashionable inside Iran than Iranians outside of Iran?
Right.
Right? So why in the diaspora? First of all, no, let me, before I get to that, your own experience, you've talked about how limitations created the conditions where, let me quote from you. You were a teenager, Western products were banned, this is the 80s. So when you got those commodities, you had access to them, you really noticed them, and you had to create your own version of pop culture. I'm quoting you, we had to wait for someone to bring these things from the outside, or we had to make our own, and we slowly started to create our own story. So that suggests that you're living in this, particularly in the decade after the Islamic Revolution, you're living in a particularly repressed state, and your creative instincts are flourishing because you're given a little box to work in that doesn't have access to the bigger box, right?
Absolutely, yes. So that sparked the creativity. I cherish those items that we had no access to, because at that point we didn't. So let's say somebody's coming and bringing a gift of a pair of Levi's for me. I loved it. And then what should I do to have a second pair? I can't wait for someone else to come. So let me make my own. So until here, it's a driving force, and we have it. But what are you going to put on that denim to make it your own? What kind of art? Where are you going to get it? You're going to tap into which part of your brain? Which part of your heritage? You're going to put calligraphy on it? How do you know what calligraphy is? Why do you know it? So I think the second part relies on that cultural factor, because it's there. We know that it's there. We know we do have the Sohrab Sepehri, who's a fantastic poet but a painter on the side, and we have these phenomenal things in our culture. So it's really there. And me as a teenager, I started putting all these graffitis on the denim when I was 16, 17, but the graffitis were kind of like the Zenderudi paintings in my house. Why was it there? Why did my dad have that in the house? Why not something else? So we're exposed to that, and it doesn't mean that you have to be on an intellectual level to be exposed to that. It's there.
So then the diaspora. So then the millions of Iranians now outside of Iran, and especially those in Western countries, who have easier access to luxury brands and tend to, it seems, place more emphasis on wearing these labels as a way to display their social status. And as a result, their fashion choices can sometimes be seen as more formulaic, less original compared to those of Iranians inside Iran. Why are Iranians in the diaspora? I cherish the fact that I get to ask you this question. Why are Iranians in the diaspora still so brand obsessed in terms of what are considered those traditional status brands in Western fashion?
Right. They have to fit in. They have to fit in. So they came to an environment that the challenge is to fit in. So if I buy this Birkin, I'm going to look like this other woman who has it. Very simple. And it's a horrible thing to think about it, because do you like the bag? Do you like the color? Birkin is a men's bag. It was intended for men. And it became a female bag because Jane Birkin started.
Right. I thought it was.
So do you know that? It's a very masculine bag. There's nothing sexy
No,
about it.
I actually didn't. I thought it was made for women. That's so interesting.
But we have to have it because it's $100,000 and it looks like we fit in. So, but I just want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding. There's nothing wrong with liking luxury. I mean, luxury is luxury. I want to better everything. But the proposition changes for those guys because they come in an environment and the first step is to fit in, right? These kids in Iran, they're there. They don't have to fit in, but they have to brand themselves. So they get really creative. They become brand agents.
But after 40 years in LA, the instinct is still, I need to fit in?
I think so.
It's a bit sad, really.
I mean, if it gives them happiness, it's not sad. I mean, it's if it makes them happy to me, it is. I look at it and I'm like, but they all look like each other.
Well, that's,
it's the same thing repeated.
And the pressure to, I was telling Super P, who works with me this morning, that, I've always driven a Mini car. I have nothing against luxury.
Right.
I'm with you. Great. And if you've worked hard, you've got money and you want to buy luxury things, good on you. But I like Minis. I grew up in England. It reminds me of England. It's my little brand thing,
Right.
I still feel self-conscious when I go to a Mehmouni and all the cars are a uniform BMW SUV or Mercedes, and I've got my Mini Countryman, even if it's souped up, and because I don't want to buy one of those. I don't want to be just a follower of what we're supposed to do. Right. I don't understand why. So I guess what you're saying is that instinct, the fit-in instinct, trumps the creative instincts and the traditions that you've just been making the great case that is in our DNA?
For the ones who are less fashionable than the folks in Iran, yes. And by no means I'm saying whoever is in LA is a brand victim.
Right.
I mean, they're very creative and stylish people there that I know myself. And I'm in touch with them. But the majority that you're calling out, because there's a contrast between them and the same group in Iran, the way I answer this for myself is that they have to fit in. Their challenges are very different. Those guys don't have to fit in. They just have to show that they're creative. They have to... it's not really a joke that 70% of a country are below the age 40. So that means each one of them can influence a group of friends.
But the best part of what you've said, by the way, I only drive a Mini because I can't get a Jian. If I could, I've never seen a Jian.
Yeah.
If I could ever get a Jian, that'll be that's my car, the shitty little Jian. The best part of what you said about the young people in Iran is not just that because of their own creative instincts and because of the limitations, et cetera, they're doing interesting things. It's that they don't, if I'm hearing you correctly, they also don't necessarily give a fuck about what they're supposed to wear, the Gucci, whatever, that they're more open to doing what they want, unchained from status expectations. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I don't know if they necessarily don't care about that. The economic factor is there. I mean, if it was there, I don't think they, with the situation, all of them could afford that. It's not that they don't care, but if they all start to look like each other, then there is no branding. Let's say somebody simplified this for me and said, you know what branding is? You go to a gala, go to a party. People don't know you. Before they come to you and start to talk to you, you have to wear something so that they come to you. That's branding, right? So these kids are so concerned about that, to be able to attract and influence a group of people, to have a brand, to have a specific look and brand. And there's a lot of them that they look horrible as well. I mean, the way with the style and everything. I mean, it's not that, we're not saying that they're on top of the fashion world, but what I'm saying that they're really trying hard to distinguish themselves from something else, which is very plausible and it's very exciting.
You're in touch with a lot of young designers there,
yes.
right? What are you most excited about in terms of what young designers in Iran are doing today?
The way they present themselves is very professional, and I'm very surprised when I look at it. They have a little showroom, they have an Instagram page, they show everything, they go to fittings, they go to focus groups, they do things that are correct without having a fashion education. So that means they observed and they learned, and they started to follow some steps that are correct in a way. I have a feeling that, I go to Istanbul a lot for work. Those guys are very creative. So what they did with design...
Those guys meaning the Turks?
Yes. Their fashion industry is very advanced. But a lot of people tell me, you know what, these guys are super creative. They are. But at the same time, they have a very strong manufacturing arm that can feed into this creativity. Now, these folks in Iran, they don't have that at all. You cannot manufacture anything correctly, with the supply chain problems, quality problems, and all of that. So they really have to step up their game in the design part, because it's not like whatever they sketch tomorrow, a factory is going to produce that. They really have to be creative. The fabric choices are not a lot. They have to work within certain boundaries. That's why it kind of comes off as the extra creative in a way.
What do you, as a mentor, I'm sure you're put in that position sometimes, even unwittingly. There's a young designer inside Iran going, Nima, what should I do? What's my best first step forward? What's your message to them generally?
One of the issues that I see a lot is that they look at big brands and they think that they have to try for a few years and their savior is going to come and save them and turn them into a big brand.
What savior?
Let's say
a corporation?
Let's say a VC or an angel investor, whatever it is, there is a savior. So they run, and at some point they stop waiting for the savior. I would like to tell them that do not wait for anybody, because even if they not run and they walk slow, they're going to become successful if they keep a steady pace. So it's not, this savior is not, this is true not only in Iran and everywhere else as well, because a lot of people, they don't really want to put too much work. They want to put a certain amount of work, and they're like, okay, is it worth it if I push this any further, because it's not working, so somebody should come and buy me at this point. I don't think that's necessarily correct. It has changed a lot of big brands, but that way of thinking is not believing in yourself.
Can I ask you a strange twist on this what we're talking about? Do you believe that? I think that I don't meet very many Iranians outside of Iran who don't wish for change in Iran in terms of freedom and democracy, etc. Do you think on some level that if Iran was to change overnight tomorrow, that interesting development of the creativity of the design inside Iran would be affected? In other words, that in a negative way somehow?
No. So if
you know what I'm asking, right?
Yeah. Right. So if that has happened, if that is going to happen, let's say, maybe and maybe not, the limitation factor is going to be removed from the story, let's say, hypothetically. But if the manufacturing arm gets added to the factor, then it's going to be great. Then it's going to mean that whatever you had in your mind, now you can have it in reality. So we do not have a good supply chain because of all the issues that the country has and the sanctions and whatnot. But if the manufacturing arm is there, that is going to help a lot of these young designers. So they can see their creations in front of them, and they can have ready to wear, and they can have mass productions and stores and whatnot. They don't have that. So if you're saying that if you remove their limitation, the creativity is gonna die? No, because I don't think all of it comes from limitation.
It's such a, it's really been a great pleasure getting to talk to you. I was, I've always been told that you're an intellectual, and it's really.
I'm not at all. I don't consider myself.
You certainly sound like it, and you've made the case, by the way, that you've read a lot of books a few times in this interview. Don't be backing off that now. You clearly have a strong intellect. It's really, really good getting to hear your perspective. A couple questions before I let you go, and I've kept you here a long time. How do you? I was going to say, how do you define success? But let me ask you how you will define success for you and your company for the next decade.
So on a personal level, anybody who is involved in any kind of business, there is a fun part and a hideous part of that business. So no business is all fun or all hard work. It's just a mixture of two. If I keep the fun part, the majority of it, I'm going to be very happy. I don't necessarily have to get to a point that, okay, the revenue is going to double and triple and this and that. I really care about the happiness part as well. So I have to stay satisfied with this. I'm really afraid of turning something that was fun at some point into a pure business. Not that I don't like financial success. It's just that then it's going to be a job. It's not going to be a fun thing.
And it's not a job? I mean, I'm guessing you probably work really hard. Do you take days off?
No.
You don't take days off.
And I do work hard.
You work 7 days a week.
Yes.
And you probably are kind of a workaholic, right? You probably have a full schedule every day.
Probably, yeah.
Well, not probably. You know. So, what about that? I mean, I mean, do you need to think about that balance?
I assume majority of it is fun, and that's why I'm doing it, because nobody just likes to be a workaholic of a non-fun work, right? Because that's just not right. I say this to a lot of my friends.
Some people can't stop themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of people come and say, I hustle every day. If you hustle all your life, that means you're doing something wrong. You can't be hustling all day long. You have to hustle maybe until you're 18, and after that, it has to be a smooth ride. Otherwise, you did something wrong somewhere. So the workaholic part is because it's fun. So I continue doing it, and it's exciting. I design something, and then people like the design, and then people can connect to each other, and it's very exciting. It's just fascinating for me that the name of Iran and Iranian history comes up in a very unconventional setting, at a gala or a party, let's say in New York, and because of a handbag. So that's fascinating. It's not because of reading a piece of poetry or watching an art film that is abstract to understand, and then you're like, oh wow, Iranian. It's just because of a very vain item that all of a sudden you start talking about the Iranian culture. I like that fascinating. I mean, I find that fascinating.
And finally, I mean, maybe jumping off of that final point, NIMANY, the company, the brand, it's a pretty big deal these days. Like it's a big company, right? You're doing a lot of things, right? I mean, it's successful. You've got products. You're known around the world. You've got a strong clientele. It's also seemingly very dependent upon you. You're NIMANY. You are the guy. Is that a business liability?
It is. It's not a good thing. So any successful business needs to be able to delegate. And I can delegate a lot of things, but one thing that it's difficult to delegate is that I kind of understood a formula during these 15 years, that what is the right dosage of art to use. That is a very valuable thing for this brand. So that's a big question mark. Now, how are you going to find somebody who is going to understand that? How can I transfer that? Do I have the ability to transfer this correctly to a group of people. I really try, and I wish that I get to that point very soon that I can easily transfer that. I mean, it's a great success if I can do that.
It's such a great pleasure to have you here. To end off where we started, you've got this pop-up the next 3 days. There is actually our largest market of the cities that listen to this program is Toronto. So if somebody comes down to downtown Toronto, King Street, to see your pop-up in the next 3 days, what do they see? Do they see you? Are you there?
I'm going to be there. But most importantly, more important than me, I'm going to have products on this pop-up that are not on the website, not released, and they will be the first time that they can see these items, because these are whether one-of-a-kind, rare, or hasn't been released kind of items.
Wow.
And the space is a very interesting space.
Can I say like what?
There are certain jackets, certain handbags. There is a very specific clutch that I've been working on for 4 years. It goes back to our discussion about Cyrus and Darius. And I finally got to a point that I'm okay with producing it, and I produced it. No one has seen it. It's going to be released on these 3 days. And the space is a fantastic space because few of my favorite designers like Martin Margiela, they hold their pop-up shows at this space. So it's an interesting space. And the group who managed and designed the event for me called Turan, they're based in Toronto, and they're pretty capable people, and they put together an interesting 3-day pop-up.
Good luck with it. Can't wait to see it. Thank you for doing this. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
Hope to do it again. To be continued. Merci.
Thank you.
This is Roqe, episode 312. Are people inside Iran more fashionable? The answer seems to be an unequivocal yes, based on Nima, who is just in the studio. Nima Behnoud has left the Roqe Studio. Pegah has come back in. Smart Pegah, hello. I'm so energized by that interview. There's so many things he said that I can't wait to sit and think more about. Like, I don't even know where to start. Nirvana changed the game.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, I get it. It's so true now that I think about it. I mean, I'm a kid of the 90s. This was like, I remember that. I remember years in university where everybody, men, women, whatever, just wore the same lumberjack oversized shirts and jeans, Kurt Cobain style. The fact that he doesn't care about, doesn't want clients, doesn't want an audience, doesn't want a customer that only wants to support because of the Iranian kind of thing. And I thought that was fascinating to just say, I mean, that's a business person. I mean, that's a smart business. He's like that. You can't build a career that way.
Yeah, he
I want people to want
that limitation, I guess.
He wants people that will love the styles, to be into what he's doing rather than the fact to support him because he's doing things for Iranian culture.
And the reality is there's so much more than just Iranians who know the brand and appreciate it and go after
it. He made the case over and over again that it's the majority of his clientele is not Iranian. And that was really, I mean, and the Kanye stuff. I mean, there's a lot there to chew on. I really appreciated how I'd heard, he's good buddies with Kambiz Hosseini. And Kambiz said, I was texting with him a couple of nights ago, and Kambiz said, because I guess Kambiz used to do his show out in New York. Nima is of NIMANY is Nima NY.
NY, yes.
So they were good buddies, or they are. And Kambiz said, this guy's, he's super smart. He's really fun to talk to.
I mean, there was so much that he said. Of course, I agreed with everything that he was saying, but there was so much that he mentioned that I hadn't even thought of. I mean, for me, it was just, of course, Iranians in Iran are more fashionable. They're limited, and that limitation creates creativity, and every choice that they make is a political statement. And I mean, all these things that I think many Iranians know as a result of seeing what's coming out from inside Iran. But the fact that he explained it and took it that much further to say that, yes, it is limitations, but it's also something creative that's been with us historically, and really pinpointed that. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and his it's so. I mean, when you interview somebody who's been that successful, despite the fact that he's an artist, he's an illustrator, he's a designer, he's a guy who draws. He's not somebody who's sort of stopped at that and said, I'm an artist. Hopefully I'll have a good manager who can do the business part. He goes to school. He sets an intention to become really sharp about the business elements here. And you heard him talking about the percentages of how much to be Persian, how much to not be, to find the sweet spots to sell the most. I mean, he's really, if I were a young person in fashion, I would die to be mentored by this guy. I mean, it's quite an education, and it's an interesting topic that I don't necessarily agree that everyone would immediately think that Iranians are more fashionable inside Iran, even amongst Iranians.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. I actually think that even amongst some Iranians, there's prejudices about what happens inside Iran, or there's expectations or stereotypes about what happens inside Iran, and you have to scratch a little bit to get to what the case that he's making. That is a really good one.
I think definitely in the last at least 5 to 10 years, it's become so much more known that there are these brands coming out from inside of Iran that's why I immediately think, most Iranians would understand that. But I can see
you see all these new dynamic, as you said, these dynamic designers on Instagram and stuff who are inside Iran. Although it was interesting to ask him, how do you feel about the fact that they're following your footsteps, kind of aping what you do, mimicking you to a certain extent. And are you pissed off by that? And he kind of basically said he was, but only because they're not doing it as well as him, which I thought was interesting too. We'd love your feedback on this. If you want to continue this conversation or tell us more about it, info@Roqe Media, or people inside Iran more fashionable. Really enjoyed that chat with Nimani. We thought we would do a roundup after, so we'll do it right now, Pegah, before we end the show. And I know that there is an election coming up in Iran, which is kind of preoccupying a lot of the oxygen that normally is there for news out of Iran.
That's right.
What is the latest with this election, other than from what I assume or what I hear, most people are, especially in the backdrop of the uprising and Mahsa Amini, et cetera, are not expecting to participate in this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is exactly what you just mentioned, the fact that there is this expectation that not a lot of people are going to participate. But I think that gets broken down into two different kind of aspects. The first is there's a bunch of campaigns to actually boycott the election, and a lot of these campaigns are being started within the diaspora. You see, activists really being at the forefront of these campaigns, saying that any sort of engagement in this election is going against everything we've been trying to fight for over the last year and a half. So there's that aspect of it. And then there's the aspect of the elections and those living inside Iran, where there's been preliminary research and some preliminary polls that have been done. And that's showing less than a 34% expected turnout.
Wow.
That's something like 1 in 3 is likely to vote. And when you look at it even a little bit further, for those between the ages of 18 and 29, only 19% of them have even considered going to vote.
Wow.
So you really do see that that lack of faith and that lack of trust within the system. And that's why so many people aren't going.
P.S. Lack of democracy.
Exactly.
I mean, what illegitimate government? I mean, what is already an illegitimate government becomes even more illegitimate when only 18% have voted, right?
That's right. And one of the things, there's been a couple of groups that have done kind of a bit of a study into this and why this is going to be one of the years where there's going to be the least amount of turnout. And some of the information that's been pulled from that study I thought was just really fascinating. And I mean, things that we've talked about over the last year and a bit, but still interesting to note is that most of the population is saying that they have really nothing left to lose And so the society is looking at it as, there's jobs are scarce, corruption is rampant, the economy is at an all-time low, and all you see is the ruling elite where, of course we know the problems of the Islamic Republic and what they're doing. And so everything is just so out of touch with the needs of the Iranians within the country that they refuse to take part.
But isn't it also it's just a false choice? Like the slate of candidates are not, it's not like you can vote for the person who's wants to change the regime and
no, absolutely.
And bring in socialism or something,
For sure. And even with, who used to be referred to as like the reformist candidates, so many of them have been taken out of the race in the sense that there's been, false reasons, of course, but accusations and things like that saying that they're not qualified, if you will, to run. And I put qualified in kind of air quotes because we all know that there's no real system to really qualify them. And on that same note, when we talk about the ruling elite, we look at things like the tone and the change in tone. So anytime there's the elections taking place within Iran, we see a shift in what the Islamic Republic, their messaging, the way that they approach individuals, all of that. So one of the examples of that is actually last week, Ali Khamenei he had a speech in regards to the upcoming elections, and he was borderline begging people to come out and vote, and he was trying to really play the nationalism card, saying that all Iranians should come out and vote. And something that he did, which is really interesting, is that he said, if we don't, then things will start to fall apart, but I don't want to accuse anyone. And he kept driving this point home that he didn't want to accuse any group of individuals or any demographic or anything like that. And that's a first. We haven't seen him, be so soft-spoken in any of his speeches up until this point. And I think that's as a result of the fact that this is the first election after the killing of Mahsa Amini.
All right. What else? Anything else you want to talk about in the roundup?
I think the election is really just the most important.
When is it?
Tomorrow, March 1st.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, right. Imminent.
Yes,
right.
Getting there.
So for most people listening to this, it's already happened.
Probably.
They'll have the actual percentages of people who didn't vote, or if they can find out. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well. And you did you want to say something about Narges Mohammadi?
Yes, Narges Mohammadi's father passed away, I believe just 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken. And, usually, even if you are a prisoner and you have a loss of that magnitude, you are sometimes given the ability to attend funeral processions and things like that. And, of course, Narges Mohammadi was denied that option. And so she, of course, was very upset about that, and as rightly so. But being the fierce advocate that she is, when asked about it, not only did she comment on that, but she also took the opportunity to reject the idea of this election and used again her minimal platform at this point to voice her opinion on that as well.
All right. Thanks, Pegah. Thanks for that. Thanks for the roundup. Thanks for being here. Thanks to Nima Behnoud and NIMANY. And again, give us your thoughts on that or anything we do on this program at info@roqemedia.com or post on any of our platforms. This is Full Time for Roqe for today. There it is. There's the music. Well done, Super P. You got it in there. For all things Roqe related, go to our website, roqemedia.com. That's the site, roqemedia.com, where you can find all things Roqe related, including all of our back episodes, our funnies, our different series that we've had, the contemporary history of Iran, the videos, etc. It's all there, roqemedia.com. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together each week. Smart Pegah, Super Parisa, Savvy Roham, Talented Anahita, Bearded Omid, Methodical Kabe. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us and for sharing our content. Please do subscribe if after all this time you haven't done so already. Find me on Instagram at Jian Gomeshi. Mizun Bashi.